Welcome to In Such a Time, conversations on Jewish life, leadership, and meaning. Each week, Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Liora Landi explore the moments, questions, and ideas that shape who we are and who we aspire to be. And now, for this week's conversation.
We are pleased to share our high holiday sermons with our podcast audience. On Kol Nidre, I spoke about responding to antisemitism by solidifying our Judaism. Enjoy.
Good Yontif. On Rosh Hashanah, I focused on a question that has very much been on my mind, namely, how ought we members of the Jewish community balance our own needs and interests versus those of the larger world? Tonight, I would like to focus inward towards a question often posed by our members. As anti-Semitic speech and hate crimes against Jews continue to skyrocket both home and abroad, how ought we members of the Jewish community respond? What can we do about it? As we enter into the sacred period of Yom Kippur, in order to reflect upon our deeds and make the necessary changes towards self-improvement, this question sits on our hearts. Some say perhaps the better answer is PR. If only we could better convey our concerns and better articulate the fear held within our community, then the world would certainly notice. Or perhaps we ought to do a better job at demonstrating our empathy and sorrow for the fact that innocent civilians have certainly died and that mistakes have been made. Or maybe if only the world knew that emaciated child from Gaza on the front page of the New York Times actually suffers from a chronic illness and was receiving treatment abroad at the time of publishing, or that hundreds of trucks were waiting for the UN to be delivered, or that every hospital that Israel has targeted has been proven to serve as a Hamas bunker, then everyone will see things our way. Then they will feel our pain. And similarly, if only the news focused on the everyday anxiety that faced Jews here and abroad, the world will know us. However, I fear that this strategy comes up short in two important ways. First, the moment you are obliged to defend yourself, you've already ceded half the debate. To argue whether or not Israel is carrying out an intentional genocide only gives credence to the notion in the first place. What should never have even been a question is now framed as a pro and con argument. As the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre once observed, quote, "The anti-Semite does not accuse the Jew of stealing because he thinks he stole something. He does it because he enjoys watching the Jew turn out his pockets to prove his innocence." And second, striving to make the case that Jews are worthy, contributing, and honest citizens worth caring about, or that Israel really isn't that bad, only reduces us to the historical position of seeking the outside world's approval and acceptance. In Theodor Herzl's vision, the Jewish state meant no longer having to accommodate, explain ourselves, ingratiate ourselves to the larger world. Just as French people don't have to explain France, Chinese people explain China, we should not fall for the bait of having to serve as Israel's spokespeople for each and every policy. The Jewish state and this war are far from perfect. There is much reason for soul searching, which certainly is and will continue to happen. But just as Russian Americans are not targeted for their country of origin's war, a war of aggression rather than defense, all the more so we should not be subject to hate for Israel's actions. For these reasons, I don't see PR being the solution to our crisis. The fact is that since the dawn of Christianity, Jews have been perceived by some as standing in the way of the world's salvation. The same was said in the secular world, with the Jew as stand-in for the impediments of capitalism, communism, socialism, or simply a social contaminant. Now it is said of Israel as the symbol for all that is abhorrent to the modern worldview: settler colonialist, racist ethno-state, imperialist, apartheid enabler, genocidal aggressor. If an abhorrent value exists, it must be attributed to Israel. And so no, I don't believe that if we could only find the right exact words, the situation would change. These feelings of animosity hold deep historical roots that lie far beneath the surface of everyday life. So rather than focus externally tonight, I am suggesting an inward approach. As many of us learned as children, you can't change people, you can only change the way that you react to them. I believe the change that needs to come from within us is towards a more honest, more authentic, more prideful embrace of our own Jewishness. As Rabbi Jonathan Sacks famously wrote, "Non-Jews respect Jews who respect their Judaism." Non-Jews respect Jews who respect their Judaism. That's what I want to talk about tonight. In his 1975 landmark essay, "The Masks Jews Wear, the Self-Deception of American Jewry," it's only like 10 pages, it's a great read, the late Dr. Eugene Borowitz illustrates the transformation of Jewish identity in the diaspora. Borowitz recalls in medieval Catholic Spain the emergence of the derogatory term marrano, literally swine, for those Jews who converted to Catholicism under economic or political coercion, but secretly continued to practice their Judaism at home. Under massive oppression, these Jews often did what they needed in order to survive. In fact, the Spanish Inquisition came about not because the Jews were unwilling to convert, but rather so many did convert under false pretense that authorities could no longer tell who was a real Christian or a secret Jew. Borowitz turns this idea on his head, criticizing the modern American Jew as a reverse Marrano. For me, this part really hits home. A reverse Marrano is someone who is proudly and loudly Jewish in the public sphere, but whose home and personal practice are vacant and lacking for Jewish substance. The reverse Marrano may shout against the anti-Semites in the town square or on social media, but returns to a home with little knowledge, little activity, no observance. In his important post-October 7th book, For Such a Time as This, my colleague and friend Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove details the plight of the reverse Marrano. He writes, "And uncomfortable as it is to discuss, the impoverished condition of the religion of many diaspora Jews sits in plain view. We are more at home with debating the Iran deal and the grades of uranium that can be weaponized than we are with opening a prayer book. We make every effort to understand the opportunity and challenge of critical race theory, but we are flat-footed when asked what it means to stand in covenantal relationship with God. We are willing to drive for hours to stand on the sidelines at our children's club sports, but we find ourselves unable or unwilling to sit next to them in synagogue on a Friday night or Saturday morning. We'll find any fad diet other than the one prescribed by our Torah. We would rather label another a self-hating Jew or settler colonialist than acknowledge that our children or grandchildren have no ostensible connection to Judaism, never mind the state of Israel." Rabbi Cosgrove's words, they hit hard because they ring true. However, I believe that October the 7th represents a turning point in our history. In so many ways, the catastrophe has forced us to consider what role Judaism plays in our lives and its centrality to our identity. In the weeks and months following October the 7th, we here at Bethel received a deluge of calls from people saying, "I never realized how much my Judaism meant to me until now." And I think that begins with joining a community. We are honored and lifted by the presence of many such individuals and many such families who chose to join our congregation after October the 7th tonight. The early 20th century German Jewish philosopher Franz Rosenzweig argues that we should not think about this as a binary between simply observing or not observing the commandments. Instead, he believes that each of us find our own level of observance with the goal of doing a little bit more each time. When he was asked if he wore tefillin, phylacteries on his head and arm, Rosenzweig responded, "Not yet." That is, we are constantly searching, calibrating, seeking to deepen our level of learning and activity. It's not about whether or not you keep all 613 mitzvot of the Torah. It's that you do the best you can and you continue to push yourself forward. For many of us, October the 7th and its aftermath has acted as a catalyst towards greater observance. Perhaps the best chronicle stories of Jewish awakening post-October the 7th comes from the stories of many of the hostages once they returned home, thank God. Although completely secular, Omer Shem Tov began keeping Shabbat while held in the tunnels of Gaza, avoiding using his only flashlight, making a kippah out of a discarded napkin, saving a few drops of juice to say Kiddush on Friday nights. At the same time, his secular parents had begun keeping Shabbat as a source of strength and comfort and faith that he would come home alive. After 500 days of captivity, Omer returned to his family earlier this year, where they have continued their newfound observance together. Or take Agam Berger, who spent her time in captivity refusing unkosher food, keeping Passover, and praying for her release. Like Omer, Agam's parents also turned to Jewish practice for strength, opening a minyan prayer gathering in their building. When she was freed from Gaza in January of this year, Agam was photographed in the rescue helicopter, having written in Hebrew on a whiteboard, "I chose a path of faith, and I returned through a path of faith. There is no other than our Creator." In an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, she later wrote, "Our faith and covenant with God, the story we remember on Passover of redemption, is more powerful than any cruel captor." Like the Shem Tov family, the Berger family has continued their observance long after Agam's miraculous return. There are dozens and dozens of stories of hostages who not only turned to their Judaism during captivity, but have retained and built upon it, finding stronger Jewish identity in the aftermath of October the 7th. In this way, they echo the words sung by the Israelites as they marched to freedom from Egypt, "Ozi v'zimrat Yah v'hi Yeshua." In my strength I sang, I called out to God, and it was for me a source of transformation. Tonight I would like to share 3 short stories about members of our own community who, after October the 7th, found meaning in greater Jewish engagement. And in doing so, they strengthened themselves in a way they will never have to explain to any anti-Semite. After all, they didn't do it for them, they did it for themselves. First story. In the wake of October the 7th, 4 non-Jewish women in our community, all of whom had been already living somewhat Jewish lives and some co-parenting Jewish children, realized that this was no longer enough. They woke up on October the 8th with the realization that they felt Jewish. Together they partnered with Rabbi Landi for a year's worth of learning and observance. And this past spring, each of these 4 amazing women went to the mikveh and formally cast their lot in joining the Jewish people. The tragedy of October the 7th and its ensuing aftermath helped them to realize they'd actually been Jewish all along. They just didn't know it yet. Tonight I'd like to acknowledge these 4 women and offer our appreciation and celebration for their decision. We are so much better for your inclusion among us. I'd like to ask these 4 amazing women to rise who are present. I see 1, I see 2, I see 3, I see 4. Thank you. You can sit. The Talmud teaches that when a prospective convert approaches, we should push them away, saying, "Why would you want to join the Jewish people? Don't you know that we are hated and persecuted throughout the world? Now, you would think that the ideal answer from the convert would be, no, you're not. You people are great. Everyone loves you. But that's not the case. The convert is meant to respond, yes, this is true, but I nevertheless wish to be counted among you. That is, we aren't trying to solve the outside world and how they feel about us. These 4 women, they did it for themselves. Second story. In recent years, I got to know the grandson of one of Bethel's former temple presidents. Let's call this grandson Benjamin. Benjamin was raised in an unobservant home in the Midwest where he neither participated in Jewish education nor became bar mitzvah. But he always held a deep curiosity and pride around his Jewish heritage. After October the 7th, Benjamin felt an immediate sense of solidarity with the Jewish people, especially as he encountered anti-Israel protest, one after another, at his university. Ultimately, Benjamin made the decision to drop out of school, to move to Israel, and to join the IDF as a lone soldier, one of hundreds of Jewish young people from around the globe who serve in the military despite not having any immediate family in Israel. I was honored to write a letter on his behalf, and even happier to meet him and his fellow lone soldiers for lunch in Tel Aviv this past summer, where Benjamin spoke of his pride for helping to defend the one and only Jewish state. I'm hoping that our Bethel Israel trip members can meet him this December, as he's an inspiration for all of us. Third story. Those of you who know my wife, Yael, know that unlike her very public husband, she prefers a level of privacy. And so I'll speak here with trepidation. Although she was raised in a secular family, Yael is deeply knowledgeable and holds her Judaism with every ounce of her being, for those of you who know her. However, in the aftermath of October the 7th, she felt compelled to do more. Professionally, this meant working with synagogues like ours to create the October the 7th memorials and other Jewish ritual items we find here. But privately, she felt an inner shift as well. The Friday ritual of Hafreshat Challah entails not only baking challah each Shabbat, but also removing a piece as an offering connected to the priestly ritual of the ancient temple in Jerusalem. And when removing that piece, it is customary to pray for the strength and safety of those in need. Soon after October the 7th, Yael joined thousands and thousands of Jews around the world in observing this ritual by baking challah and pausing to pray for the well-being of the hostages and that they may come home. She's continued this ritual now for the past 2 years. Similarly, the book of Psalms is often read by Jews in times of worry or calamity. In the days following October the 7th, reading groups of Psalms began to organize online so that all 150 could be read daily for each hostage. And so one day, walking together in the city, Yael and I ducked into a bookshop where she bought her first pocket-sized Hebrew edition of Psalms to carry with her at all times, and from which she has continued to read, praying for the safe return of hostages. Through each of these rituals, Yael not only took on additional levels of observance, but felt a connection, a kinship to Jews around the world, bonded through action and prayer. Taken together, I believe that each of these stories provides a salient answer to the question we often receive: what should we do about rising anti-Semitism? The answer is simple: be more proudly, authentically, knowledgeably, confidently Jewish. What we need is not an external response to those who hate, but rather an internal one towards loving ourselves. For too long, I believe we have relied far too heavily on anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment as shortcuts, catalysts to the building of Jewish identity. It's as if to say, my kid may not know much about their Judaism, and we don't observe anything at home, but the birthright trip, that'll straighten them out. We've puffed out our chests and been so strong in answering what we are Jewish against that I worry that we sometimes forget what we are Jewish for. We ought to ask ourselves, if all the anti-Semitism were to vanish and Israel be fully accepted into the family of nations, what would be left to source our Judaism beyond a purely cosmetic experience? What would it look like for our internal Judaism to match our external identity, to no longer live as reverse Moranos? What is the ritual or learning that we have, in Rosenzweig's words, not yet taken upon ourselves? As Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg once taught, a community cannot survive on what it remembers. It will persist only because of what it affirms, what it believes. Former Michelle Obama speechwriter and author Sarah Hurwitz takes on this challenge in her new book, As a Jew, Reclaiming Our Story from Those Who Blame, Shame, and Try to Erase Us. Speaking about the book, she articulated the challenge before us, saying, "You can't fight anti-Semitism if you are a contentless Jew. If someone tells you that Judaism is violent and vengeful with an angry, hateful God and is not spiritual, if you know nothing about Jewish tradition, what are you going to say? Oh my God, I love Seinfeld?" If someone tells you that Israel is a settler colonialist enterprise and you have not studied Israeli history, are you going to be like, "My bubby makes good kugel"? Tikkun olam? She said at that time, not me. We have a big problem, or I might say opportunity, of helping Jews be Jews. Hearing that, I want to share with you the good news. The Hebrew word to curse, lekalel, is almost identical to the word to bless, lehalel. One only needs to lengthen one leg of the hay a few millimeters to become a kaf, transforming its meaning. We learn from this in our tradition that moments of curse and chaos and tragedy often carry with them opportunities for blessing. The curse of the destruction of the temple was transformed into the blessing of a synagogue and home-centered Judaism we observe today. The curse of 2 millennia of anti-Semitism led to the blessing of Klal Yisrael, the sense that the Jewish people are united together as one. The curse of the Holocaust led to the realization of the need for Jewish statehood and a country to call our own. Tonight, as we take stock of the many curses experienced in the wake of October the 7th, may we consider the ways in which we might enter into blessing. May we strengthen our sense of what it means to be Jewish, not for the approval of the outside world, but proudly and authentically for our own. Please know that you have in we members of the clergy, staff, and fellow members of this community, this amazing community, willing and motivated partners to accompany you on this journey. Operators are standing by. Tonight I urge all of us towards committing to learning, towards celebrating, observing, living more authentically Jewishly. How? For starters, here's the first step. Make Shabbat observance a greater priority in your home. Adopt the weekly ritual of pausing on Friday evening to light Shabbat candles, and take that moment to share with your loved ones why you love them this week, and what moments from the past 7 days bring you a sense of gratitude and connection. It doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to take place exactly at sundown, or even be in your home. No matter where you are, make a practice of marking the end of the week by connecting with your family, your loved ones, and your heritage. After that, take one of our adult ed classes in a subject you've always been too afraid to study. Create a monthly ritual of joining us here in the sanctuary for Shabbat. Bring your kids with you. Learn about and observe Jewish holidays you may have never considered. Volunteer to read Torah on Shabbat, perhaps for the first time since your bar or bat mitzvah, or maybe for the first time ever. Read and discuss Jewish books. I might suggest Sarah Hurwitz's As a Jew. Participate in our monthly volunteer opportunities. Join this December's congregational trip to Israel. Whatever it is, do more. But most importantly, do it for you. Because ultimately the best response to others' hate is to develop a deep sense of love for yourself and the people who are lucky enough to call you their friends, their family, their community, your people. Ozi v'zimrat yah v'hili Yeshua, in my strength I called out to God, and it was for me a source of transformation. So may it be for all of us.
Thanks for joining us on In Such a Time. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Rabbis Jonathan Jaffe and Leora Landi, or to connect with Temple Beth-El of Northern Westchester, visit bethelnw.org, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Temple Beth-El NW. Thanks for listening.